Welcome to another edition of the All Cardinals Draft Talk podcast. My name is Donnie, joined by my co-host Andrew Harbaugh every week leading up into the 2023 NFL Draft. Andrew, right away, my guy, phenomenal Arizona State shirt. Love the representation. Even though you are not out here, you are always with us, and Spirit forks up.
Yes, and it's worn down just like I think the fan base is after seeing Jaden Daniels do so well at LSU and Herm Edwards doing whatever he did. So, but hey, I'll get a newer shirt when the better times come. And you got Rashada. So, I mean,
Yep. 5-star quarterback Kenny Dillingham doing his thing in the transfer portal. So obviously, very, very exciting times in Tempe. Hopefully, the fans will actually stay for the entire 4 quarters of the games next season, as opposed to the couple years I actually covered them at Sun Devil Stadium. But that is neither here nor there. We're going to talk about the Arizona Cardinals. We got a few mailbag questions to answer. Then we're going to dive into a Pro Football Focus post-Senior Bowl mock draft. Both the Cardinals and the Seattle Seahawks, what they were able to do in the first round, how they kind of counteract with each other. First things first, we are actually doing a giveaway for the Super Bowl. I snagged this bad boy after a long, hard day at Radio Row right before the Kevin Durant news dropped hours before that. All you need to do to enter yourself in to win this football, there is already a video published on our YouTube page. Go drop a comment on that below. We're just asking for a game winner, Super Bowl MVP, and a final score prediction. Tiebreakers will go based off of that order. The winner will obviously be announced Monday morning at the earliest, since we won't know anything that happens for the game until then. I wasn't privy to the script, so.
I'll tell you what, there's been some memes with that, and probably 99% of them are not appropriate to discuss at this point. But I'll tell you what, to say I've not had a good laugh at a bunch of them is, oh, man. And I love that the players are embracing it. Like Mina Kimes this morning, they were talking about how the Chiefs and the Eagles are both the 1 seeds, both have 6 All-Pros, both have a Kelsey brother who's an All-Pro. Just like everything matches up. Points scored for the year, the records are identical. And Mina's like, see, this is what the scripts are all about. So everyone's embracing it now, and it's been fun to just hear it plugged in a lot.
Dude, no, absolutely. Dude, and we were talking before the podcast on how great of a game the Super Bowl 57 should be. So I think we're all excited to finally just get this underway. First mailbag question, though, because we did put out a mailbag for people to respond to. We did get a total of 3 questions. So shout out to you guys. We will run through the questions, not super quickly, but kind of in a timely manner. The first one we got was from my man, James out west. Shout out to you, James. I appreciate the question. It says, why are the Cardinals awful at drafting great talent to only let them walk? Asking for a friend, of course. James, that is a phenomenal question. To answer that, I don't know. I think the previous regime of Steve Keim and all of his buddies in the Cardinals front office is over. I think Monty Ford hopefully will be leading in a new day, a new dawn, I guess would be a better way to put it, to where that won't happen. But, I mean, you look at guys like Hassan Reddick who have thrived elsewhere. Christian Kirk, who looked a hell of a lot better in a Jaguars uniform than he did in a Cardinals uniform. There's some fears that Isaiah Simmons might be treading in that same water. Hopefully Vance Joseph is either on staff to figure him out, or you bring in another guy, whoever is announced as the head coach, to bring in some sort of plan for Isaiah Simmons, because we all know how great he can be.
Yeah, no, I'm for baseball, I'm a Pirates fan. So for the longest time, we were MLB's farm system. Same idea, where it was like, oh, this person's doing great here. Can't wait to trade him for a player to be named later with cash and maybe some amenities for the staff that have to work late after the game cleaning up. Like, it's just, you're so used to that. And it gets frustrating. Like, if you're a fan base, like, clearly you can draft well. Steve Keim, I think, towards the end didn't do great, but he had a pretty solid stretch drafting players and identifying talent. And I think one of those things that's tough too is if you're an NFL team, you have to be patient, but you also have to win now because you have to keep your job. So it's one of those things where it's a double-edged sword where it's like, look, I really believe in this guy, but I also can't wait all day and all year for him to finally turn the corner, because at the end of the day, I've got to answer to this owner, this GM, and the GM has to answer to, and scouting departments. Like, it just crap rolls downhill. in every profession, but especially in the NFL. So I think that's a bigger thing, is where it takes patience, but also too, if you had the right coaching staff, maybe bringing this out of guys, that helps too. So, I mean, there's, again, two sides to every story, but again, it stinks. A prime example of that is, I think Hassan Reddick's going to be a really big difference maker on Sunday for Philadelphia. And I think Isaiah Simmons is kind of following that same path where you don't know what he is. We talked about that last time with Vance Joseph, which it seems like he's not going to be back now, based on them allowing him to kind of search for other opportunities. But Isaiah Simmons is one of those guys that I could see signing somewhere real cheap on a 1-year deal, prove it, have a Pro Bowl season, and then get a big money to go elsewhere. And then it's just another case of what could have been for the Cardinals, sadly.
Yeah, I really like the point you brought up too, where GMs need to be patient enough to allow their talent to develop, but also at the same time, the NFL is very much a what can you do now for me kind of league. And the sand particles, the hourglass run out, right? I mean, I feel like for every decent draft pick Steve Keim had done, there was like 3 or 4 other ones where it's like, my guy, what are you doing? And people will point out the misuse of Son Reddick and lately Isaiah Simmons. But even going back to guys like Andy Isabella, a couple more just escaping me right now. Levi Brown, even though at least Keim wasn't involved in the whole Levi Brown draft. The Cardinals are just, I guess, notorious for not being able to hit on some of their top picks, and people are going to argue Kyler Murray too, even though Kyler got the contract extension. He's been atop the Super Bowl 57, by the way, which is remarkable for a guy who hasn't played since Week 14 and whose team is not playing in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no. I do think, like you said, there's just a lot that goes into it, especially like with the whole Kyler Murray thing you brought up is a good transition too, which I think we have another mailbag talking about it. I just submitted a Broderick Jones report for the site, which I'm sure will go live at some point. And I wrote in there, I said, I floated out that Kyler might not be around if you got someone like a Broderick Jones who's going to be a staple piece for your offensive line or any of these upcoming draft classes. Like, Kyler might not be around for that. And I think that's one of those things where you see him get paid big money. You think he's going to be around. That being said, Osenfort's got his own – he didn't draft Kyler. And that's the other thing, too, that I think fans need to remember, too, is it's kind of like – I'm not even going to go there. I was going to make a step-parent example, but there's good step-parents. But the point is, you get into a relationship, and there's kids that are not yours, and they're tougher, and there's some adjustment. You either love to grow the kids, or you're like, man, you've been a pain in my you-know-what. And it's one of those things where I'm like a marriage with children. In the NFL, you can just cut people, trade people, and move on. So I think it's going to – I like Osafort. I love the hire. I think the head coaching hire, the way it's gearing, I think it's going to be good too with whoever's going to be who the finalists are now.
Yeah.
But with that being said, there's a lot of harsh realities on the horizon, and it might just not be where players are good elsewhere. It might just be you got to focus on what you got going on at home and what's going on for the Cardinals, and it's going to be tough for a little bit.
No, I think absolutely right. And ultimately, like, we'll see. I'm definitely team pro Kyler, which I guess is a unpopular opinion nowadays. But
I root for him too. And I like him too. And I liked that, like, people were talking about what Watt said yesterday on Dan Patrick. I don't know if you saw that, Donnie.
Yeah.
And because he wasn't like embracing Kyler and like lifting him up as a leader. And I don't think he's been that at any stage. And I think asking him to do that now is going to be tougher. But I think with the right head coach hire, the right people, like, you want your quarterback to be a leader, yeah. But like, if you got a good enough supporting cast, a rising tide lifts all ships sort of approach. So like, once you get that going, and you saw it on defense with JJ and what it was able to do for the defense this year. You saw Zach Allen, whenever he was playing, was doing well. You saw everybody else kind of rallying around that. And I think if you get somebody like that on offense where they can kind of get a veteran presence, and I'm not talking like a Colt McCoy, like I love Cole too, and I love what he brought to that quarterback room. You need somebody who's going to be out there making plays on Sundays, like a starter, and can rally the troops sort of approach. And maybe that brings it out of Kyler. Who knows? That's the other thing too, is Kyler's never had a coach that's been anything more than a yes man. And I mean that in the most respectful way to Cliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley, but the only place he had trouble was at Texas A&M, where he wasn't starting over Johnny Manziel, understandably so at the time. And Kevin Sumlin was like, fine, leave. And that was the first time he was told no. So I think this will be, apart from the ACL, I think this next year and a half for Kyler is going to be really telling in how his tenure is going to go. Not to go on a Kyler rant, but I want him to succeed. Like, all I ever hear about is how great he was in high school. We saw what he did at Oklahoma. You bring in Marquise Brown to kind of bring back that Oklahoma connection. Cody Ford even. All you're missing is Lincoln Riley. But I think we've seen the college coach experience for the last time. But no, I want him to succeed too. So.
Yeah, dude, it's wild. And I definitely get both sides of it, because if you're handing over $230.5 million over the next few years, which, by the way, the extension kicks in soon, you're expecting Kyler to evolve into a leader. You're expecting him to be the guy. He's not old by any means. He's still somewhat young. He has interest outside of football. A lot of people don't necessarily love that. His attitude sometimes is, brought into question. The whole study clause thing certainly didn't help him either. It's all just like small little things that accumulate into one big ball that is the Kyler Murray hate train that somehow continues to gain traction as the days progress. Like you said, man, dude, he's not going to be the leader you want him to be. I mean, he's not going to rally the troops before the game. He's very much a let his game and his talent speak for himself kind of thing. Whether or not a franchise quarterback should do that is an entirely different discussion. But I think we've all seen how talented Kyler could be and the potential. And I think that should play a big factor into the next head coach could be. Number one, like you said, he needs somebody who's going to not like control him, but say, look, man, like, you're here to win a Super Bowl. You got paid. It's our time to win a championship now. Here's what's going to happen. Number one, that. Number two, a guy who can properly utilize him, which is why, not to get on a head coaching rant really quick, but I am very much pro Mike Kafka. I think Lou Anarumo would be a phenomenal hire. I just think if you look at Kafka's track record with Mahomes and what he was able to do with Daniel freaking Jones last year, turning the Giants from a 4-13 squad to Daniel Jones having his best career year in literally every major passing category besides passing touchdowns, to them winning a playoff game. I think it's a very exciting thing if you get Kafka, if you get Anarumo. But bottom line, Kyler Murray was and is a very big priority in his head coaching search. You saw the stuff about Sean Payton not wanting to come here because Kyler Murray was already here. There was a report from Tony Pauline from Pro Football Network that said coaches were avoiding the Cardinals because of the financial commitment to Kyler Murray and how they would be attached to the hip with them. At the end of the day, the Cardinals have a franchise quarterback. They have him locked in their contract. We've seen how good he can be, and I think that should be enough.
Yeah, and on that note too, like, speaking on the contract, like, you got that deal done before Lamar got paid. You got it in the middle of Deshaun Watson getting paid. And there's more deals that are going to be done. Like, Daniel Jones is going to probably.
Oh, dude,
I don't know.
Lamar, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow. He's able to somehow play
like this again. This deal in hindsight is going to look like a very good deal. So, and that's the other thing too, is I think Sean Payton's going to be what Denver needs. Because of, like we just talked about, he's a guy that can have hard conversations. And I think that's something that Russell Wilson, even older, is kind of going through the same thing, where he had the success at the pros when he didn't have it before, was the underdog, finally won. Now he needs to come back to earth. Kyler's in the opposite mold. So I think Kafka, though, like, Kafka played in the league. He's coached around. He's done, like, he has a good track record as a coach. So, I mean, I like a lot that, well, I don't like it a lot because I feel older, but, like, I remember Kafka getting drafted out of Northwestern and going to back up be a backup in Philly and stuff like that. So now seeing him kind of come full circle, but he hung around the league for a while. So it's one of those things where I think that hire just makes all the sense in the world. And he's been around Andy Reid, been around Brian Dable now. Like those are two offensive minds right now in the NFL. I think you could argue are maybe the two best based on the results they're getting. So no, give me Mike Kafka all day.
Dude, absolutely. And kind of put a ball on the coaching discussion topic before we move on to our next mailbag question. People get really worried. They kind of freak out at the label offensive mind whenever it comes to a coach. I think maybe the Cardinals were a little bit guilty of that too. Through their first 12 candidates they looked at, I think 8 were defensive minds, 8 or 9. There was a mold that they kind of wanted to see, but it didn't really pan out for them either way. The difference between Kafka and a guy like Kingsbury, though, is that Kafka already has established success / track record at the pro level. Cliff Kingsbury was a major swing for a home run. It didn't work out. Granted, he was able to get them from the number 1 pick to a team in the playoffs, but I mean, it was very clear the time to move on. So if they do indeed hire Mike Kafka, I would not be worried. I would not be scared. If you're a Cardinals fan, I would be thrilled. I would be absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, and it's a different type of offensive mind. This is going to turn into take a dump on Cliff Kingsbury minute, but he didn't have a winning record in college. Yep. I think Mahomes and what he was able to do there and what he turned into, they tied into. But you really outlined that very well last week, and I think anybody who wants to hear why the Kingsbury Mahomes thing doesn't make any sense can go back to that. So I won't go back to it myself, but it just didn't make sense when it happened. It proved to not make sense long term. And now the most memorable thing you have from Cliff Kingsbury is a draft photo during COVID.
Hey, that and the one-way ticket to Thailand was pretty sweet. I won't lie.
Yeah, and back into coaching too. They were saying oh, well, you know what? Next year I'm already thinking about coming back.
Well, there's a stipulation in that severance contract, not contract, but the package where don't you have to actively look for jobs in order to collect that money? Somebody told me that.
That'd be interesting. I mean, he's collected enough that he could survive a year in Thailand, but that's
Cliff. Cliff's all right. If he's coaching or not, I think Cliff is doing.
I think he'll pop up and be I don't think he'll be one of your stereotypical not washed out, but beaten down coaches that shows up on a Nick Saban staff. But I could see somebody like Lane Kiffin bringing him into Ole Miss and just
dude, I thought he was going to get the Patriots OC job.
I don't think Belichick would do it. I think he could do a quarterback's coach job, but he'll end up somewhere in college. That makes a lot of sense and a lot of fun, and it'll get people talking. But that'll be interesting.
All right, second part of the mailbag. Shout out to John from the Facebook page. It says, is there any serious thought being given to finally developing an O-line for this team? John, I sure hope so, my man. That's something that will tie in a little bit later to what we are going to talk about. But you look at the offensive line, 4 of 5 starters. You have Justin Pugh, Kelvin Beachum, Rodney Hudson, and Will Hernandez. 4 or 5 starters from the 2022 offensive line are set to hit free agency. Could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, just depending on how you look at it. There's a lot of room for overhaul. There's a lot of room to for whoever's in charge next to put their fingerprints on this team moving forward. And I mean, you and I have not been shy about how important it is to build through the trenches. And that's where games are won and lost, man. So I think Austin Fort, coming from a strong background in New England, having success in Tennessee, where all they did was hand the ball to Derrick Henry 35 times a game, he himself should know the importance of how great an offensive line can take you, and just the overall success teams have with it. I mean, it's no coincidence that the playoff teams you see perennially, year after year, minus the Cincinnati Bengals, somehow just have these tremendous offensive lines. And there's no really sexy names on them. They're just good players you found second, third round of the draft that you go out and they just work.
Yeah, and that's talking about earlier with my Broderick Jones report. He's somebody, like, when I watched him yesterday, I finally got done with offensive tackles. He's my clear-cut number one. He's probably going to have a top 5 grade for me. But I think the quarterbacks are going to push talent lower in the top 10 to where if we have an example where, say we look back at that mock that we did a couple weeks ago where the Cardinals go back to 8, at this point now, like, obviously, and things change, so I don't want anybody kind of like, oh, we just no. The evaluation process is fluid. Opinions change. I've got till April 29th. I could change my opinion every day until then. Anyway, Broderick Jones at 8 there, like I wrote in my piece, I said, if they did this move, it would remind me a lot of like what Joe was for the Browns, where it was like the Browns drafted him at 3 that year, ironically, and after Jamarcus Russell and Calvin Johnson, and they never had to worry about the left tackle position the entire time he was on the roster. Broderick Jones, to me, is very much in that same mold. And look at the teams that have invested in left tackle positions lately in drafts, where you got that one year, the Browns got Wills, who's there. He's going to be there for a while after replacing Joe Thomas. Tristan Wirfs in Tampa Bay, all-pro player. The Giants with Andrew Thomas, don't have to worry about the left side of their line. The Chargers with Rashawn Slater, all-pro, don't have to worry about the left side of their line. That's something I think the Cardinals could look at and be like, okay, like, why haven't we done this? And the Bengals, for as much as they've thrived with Jamar Chase, and they have T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, I think if they would have gone left tackle and they would have got Penei Sewell, another great example, Detroit doesn't have to worry about the left side of their line. I think if they really invested in it this year, if they trade back, or maybe they just shock everyone and go in at 3, I wouldn't be a fan of that considering who would be on the board, but I think it would be very much again in that Joe Thomas mold where it's like, Will Anderson's a smaller edge guy. He's going to take a little bit to adjust to the NFL. Jalen Carter's really gotten away with his size and dominance in college. Maybe that scares some people off. Broderick Jones might be the safest pick in this draft. And for a front office that knows their situation, you said 4 or 5 starters, and you've got a franchise quarterback. You see what's happening in Cincinnati where they get to the playoffs, get to the Super Bowl. But pressure at the end of the day is what sinks their ship. I think, again, that's one of the other a new scenario that people need to think about if you're a Cardinals fan, which we saw how well it was received last week when we talked about.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you ever get bored, just go back to the mock draft Andrew. Andrew did, and both of us discussed, and just look through the comments. If people were that upset over trading back to number 9 and getting an edge in Brian Breesy, I cannot fathom. Dude, State Farm Stadium might be burned down if
they stay at 3 and took, like, I would laugh, but like, and not even like in a bad way, but like I said, I can see the greater picture where that would be the least sexy pick, the least splash. I mean, Bidwell, like the movie Draft Day might unfold where the owner just gets on his helicopter in this case and flies to wherever Ozenford is and just starts screaming in the draft room. Like, but we all know Bidwell will probably already be in the draft room, but that's a different discussion for a different day. But yeah, no, like sometimes, like, I think a trade back would make the most sense, but I'll tell you what, they went at 3.
Dog, I'm telling you, if Carter or Anderson are there at number 3 and they draft an offensive tackle, State Farm Stadium is going to be burned down. It's going to happen.
Well, hey, if we take the advice of the one commenter where DeAndre Hopkins is worth a first, maybe they could just trade DeAndre Hopkins for a top 10 pick, and that'll be our way to get both of them. That's
true. That is very true. To our final mailbag question, sent to me via text from my good buddy Austin. Shout out to you, my man. This kind of ties into everything because he said, in a nightmare scenario where both Jalen Carter and Will Anderson are off the board at 1 and 2. What do you do?
Trade back or go Broderick Jones. That is the boat I am on.
Okay.
Like, it just makes the most sense. Like everything I just said. Like, you don't have to worry about that left side of the line.
Can Broderick play right tackle, because DJ Humphries is still under contract for at least through next year, I believe.
I would tell Humphries to move to right tackle, but Broderick Jones has only played. I know this because, like I said, I just finished his report yesterday. Played left tackle all through high school. Played left tackle his freshman year, and played all left tackle this year. So he's never played anything but left tackle. And that's one of those things. AJ Schulte, if he heard this, would be proud of me, because the old me would be like, "Oh, he's a tackle. Just throw him on the other side." You're asking everything that he's ever done his entire life to do it opposite.
Yep.
So it's living in the United States your whole life and being like, okay, now you just landed in the UK. You're going to drive us to the hotel. Good luck.
Yep.
So
have fun.
One of our cars, not one of your cars. So and for anybody watching that's done that and pulled it off, great. But you also didn't have a semi truck coming at you head on every single play like Broderick Jones will. So, but that being said, no, I think of quarterback or if Carter. And it's funny, I did think of that the other day. I was like, you know what? Maybe Houston goes edge, and there's the Alabama connection now with DeMeco Ryans, and he can call Nick Saban up, and Saban's going to tell him everything he wants to know. I was thinking about that yesterday. I was like, man, I could see it. And again, we talked about the Cardinals doing not the Cardinals, the Texans before doing what they want to do. And we kind of said it as a Will Levis type of pick. I think Will Anderson could be an option there too. But that being said, if all the quarterbacks are there, Ozenfort's going to get a king's ransom for that pick. Like, you're talking a first this year, next year, maybe even a third year type of deal. Like, I don't think you'd have to worry about a trade back at that point. Like, literally, I think his phone would just break because so many people would be calling.
Dude, absolutely. And he's already been pretty forward about understanding the phone is going to ring during the draft. And he seems like a fairly open guy, as all general managers should be whenever it comes to evaluating their options and trading down or staying put. And in that nightmare scenario where both Carter and Anderson are gone, and if they don't want to stick with Jones at number 3, or maybe they feel like they can trade back a couple more spots and get Jones somewhere else. From my understanding, it's a pretty deep tackle, not deep, top-heavy tackle class to where there's going to be around 4 or 5 guys taken in the first round to play off the tackles. So I would very much be in the mindset of, I don't care who it is, trade whoever's going to give you the best deal, move down however many spots, recollect yourself, because obviously I think they're preparing for either Anderson or Carter. I mean, it's how could you not, right?
Right. And that's what I would do too. Like the situation we just laid out where they're both gone, I would put it a very slim chance of happening, because again, if Chicago stays pat and they take Carter, Houston realistically could trade back with somebody and still get a pick. Like, and again, they may not even. I don't see it happening. So I think the main thing to keep in mind, like you said, is Anderson or Carter. And I tweeted it yesterday. This tackle class, there's 3 stars in it, led by Broderick Jones. I have 3 first-round grades. I've got a lot of day 2 grades. And a lot of the day 2 guys, you could plug and play and be a starter. And there's some of them that have the versatility where they've played tackle and guard. Even better if you're a Cardinals fan, because you got Humphries there. Obviously, we established on the left side. Somebody that can move into guard and then move out to tackle if they decide to move on from him.
Shout to Josh Jones.
Yeah. It happens every once in a while, and usually it's a very interesting process, but it can happen. So I think this class is an example of that.
No, time will tell. And then I think to put a bow on that, nightmare scenario might be the best way to put it, I think, for everybody involved. I think because I'll be at the Cardinals facility, their facility in Tempe during the NFL draft. And just for my safety and everybody else's safety alone, I hope they end up with Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. I think either of those would be great, tremendous picks. But if not, they get Roderick Jones. I mean, like you said, not the sexy pick, but I mean, end of the day, that's going to contribute to winning football. I don't think anybody can be upset at that.
I like the flex. I'll be at the facility.
No biggie.
As I'm watching on whatever I decide to put up with, whether it be Mel Kiper or maybe Mike Mayock's back on NFL Network this year.
That's the great debate, I think, between all football friend groups is, do you watch the draft on ESPN or NFL Network?
I honestly, and not to get on a tangent here, as we're already 30 minutes into this, I, for the longest time, watched it on Bleacher Report because I was good friends with Connor Rogers. And Matt Miller, obviously, before he went to ESPN. And I always watched Bleacher Report. Like, they were tipping picks before. I love that. Last year, I don't even remember where I watched the draft. But, like, or what network. I'll probably have ESPN on just because of the dinger that goes off, like, for pure nostalgia purposes. But usually my day 3 enjoying I'll probably watch PFF on days like 2 and 3 because they're going to be the ones that take their times breaking down each pick. They're not going to just fly through it, and they're not going to highlight when the Colts have an orangutan making a pick instead of McAfee again, like we always like to talk about. But no. I'm such a moron. I just said all that. McAfee is who I watch on day 1 of the draft usually. Is I have McAfee's audio, and then underneath I have another TV. I'll do ESPN for like the actual picks. But when you work and cover this, you've got to have some fun mixed in, and that's a nice way to do it.
Yeah, dude. The draft is a 3-day stretch where you don't get any sleep. Dude, you just pound away at a keyboard. And I got my first real taste of that last year. I wouldn't trade it for anything, though. It's I'm glad we're able to do what we want to do.
Yeah, it's nuts. Like, I grew up making big boards on whiteboard paper, and like I lied in school to have a film review independent study. And my teacher came in and was checking on me in the computer lab, and they're like, "Why are you watching football?" I said, "It's my film review independent study." And they're like, "Are you really like reviewing players?" I was like, "Yeah." It happened to be the 2013 draft class. So like my quarterbacks that year were Geno Smith and EJ Manuel.
Oh yeah.
Not a great introduction by any means, but maybe it might have been 2012. I can't remember, but I just remember I was watching Geno Smith Mountaineer highlights at the time, and it's fun to see where it's been.
I was going to say, kind of touching on that, dude, the best highlights were the Tavon Austin highlights with like Helen back. I think by
that gets tweeted out, I think, once a month by the football guys account or whatever it is. And it still cracks me up every single time.
Moving on, though, tying the offensive line into what we're going to talk about next to conclude the podcast episode. Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers did do a post-Senior Bowl mock draft that had the Cardinals taking Will Anderson at number 3. Thank God, State Farm Stadium lives to see another day. But there's also other things the Cardinals will need to kind of prepare for and take notice. One of them being the Seattle Seahawks, who have 2 picks in the top 20, correct? Yep, in the top 20. And that mock draft, which I'll have to link below so everybody can go and reference what we're talking about. Anderson goes at number 3 to the Cardinals. Very great pick. The Seahawks get Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech with their first pick, correct? And then, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba, is that how you say his name?
Yep, wide receiver out of Ohio State.
Yep, and you don't draft players purposely to only specifically face a team like the Seahawks twice a year. But since you do see those guys so often, and divisional games obviously carry a little bit more importance whenever it comes to the playoff picture and how your season does go. And I would love to hear your thoughts on exactly what the Seahawks did in that mock and how that would impact the Cardinals potentially going into their day 2 and their day 3 strategy.
Yeah, no, it's something that I think one of the comments brought up last week, and it's kind of what made me want to talk about this was, if this team's doing this, why are we doing this? Or like, if we did this, why are they doing this? And in the case of the Seahawks, like, John Schneider is one of the best GMs in the league. Talent evaluator off the charts, both NFL and college level. Tyree Wilson is very much a project defensive end. He's not anybody I really want the Cardinals taking at this point, just because you don't know. But for Seattle, it's a classic pick for them. Like, they're used to taking guys on the defensive line that maybe drafted too high, maybe drafted too low, and taking the time developing them, and then in year 2 or 3, just letting them go. And for Jackson Smith and Jigba, same thing they've done with receivers. Look at what they did with Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, nobody wanted to bet on. Like, they're the Western version of the Pittsburgh Steelers, basically. And they've got other ones on the roster too, with Swain and countless others. But Eskridge
was pretty good.
Yes. And so my point is, with those 2 picks, is they're not changing course from what they're doing because they've established it and there's winning behind it. They found their quarterback again with Geno Smith. He's proven to use everybody on the field, tight ends, running backs, wide receivers. That Jigba pick will solidify that wide receiver room after Tyler Lockett's gone, because he's getting up there with his extension and everything too, money-wise. You don't know what he's going to be worth for them. So they're not going to be missing a beat. That's the other thing, is they're not rebuilding, they're retooling. So I think for those 2 positions, you go to the Cardinals side of it now, offensive line and defensive backs and the edge, because it affects the pass game, have to be prioritized this offseason. And like we joked about Broderick Jones being the pick of 3, like you said, you don't pick for who's in your conference, but again, it's not just the Seahawks that you have to worry about. Just because the Rams traded all their first round picks away and they don't have a pick in this, it's because they have a Super Bowl. Cardinals don't. So that's the other thing is you got to keep in mind, is where everybody else in the division kind of has their own process locked down and figured out. Cardinals are very much still trying to figure that out. So for the time being, they need to address where everyone else in the division is attacking them, because that's where 6 of your games come from. And you saw it this year with the NFC South, and you've seen it in the past. You don't have to have a winning record. You just have to win your division. As much sense as that statement makes, win your division, go to the playoffs, address it from there, and then who knows what happens. So I think that's where, if you look at what the Seahawks are going to keep doing, and maybe we'll do this time to time again once different picks kind of get made. Free agency obviously will affect a lot of that, but the Seahawks are very much going to be an interesting team to watch off night, apart from the Cardinals, because when they're done at 3, they're probably not going to have a first rounder again the rest of the night. I think all attention should focus to what Seattle's doing from there.
Yeah, but then obviously they are going to have a pretty high pick. I think it's pick number 34, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, you can look at that as like a later first-round pick. You can look at that as obviously one of the top picks in the second round. But I do like the point you brought up, just not with the Seahawks, but the NFC West in general, because Nick Bosa isn't going anywhere in San Francisco. Seattle, for a very, very large part of the last decade, phenomenal front 7 play. And I feel like it's kind of the deal you get with a guy like Pete Carroll there. And like you said, it's the success has not led to Super Bowls in recent years, but it's been good enough for Pete Carroll to keep his job. And I feel like, especially with the Seahawks, you kind of know what you're going to get out of their front 7. And then you move on to the Rams, who obviously still have Aaron Donald. I don't know if you saw, but yesterday he posted a shirtless video of him announcing he was going to be coming back for 2023. Yeah. So you're going to have to deal with Aaron Donald for another year, on top of whoever else the Rams can possibly obtain in free agency to put alongside next to him. If the battle of the trenches wasn't important before that, you add Tyree Wilson to the Seahawks defense. You have Nick Bosa. You have Aaron Donald. Those are premier guys. Those are premier guys who are going to be chasing after Colt McCoy the first time they play each other. And then a Kyler Murray who's still going to be having to find his footing from rehabbing from ACL meniscus surgery earlier in the offseason.
Yeah, no, and I think obviously this is a worst case scenario, but like RG3 was a very mobile quarterback. After that ACL tear, he wasn't. Obviously, it's a different time, different play styles, different builds. There's a lot that goes into it. No surgery for anybody is the same, major or minor or in between. But I don't think you can afford to have Kyler doing what he did against Las Vegas this year, where he extends a play for what seems like 35 minutes and be like, okay, well, something will open up. Like, you can't do that anymore. And that's something a younger me, where like when I was evaluating draft prospects, like I liked the mobile quarterbacks because I was like, you know what, if they have a crappy line, he can extend the play, buy you more time. Older me realizes that's not the right approach. Like, you've got to have clean pocket time to let your receivers work. The more time you give your quarterback, the less time the DBs have to competently cover receivers. So I love Kyler. I love his extra ability on the ground, and his athleticism with baseball coming into football. Like, there's so much to like with him. Make his job easier. Make every weekend a double XP weekend and give him a good offensive line and be good from there. I had to get that in there.
All right. That's actually a perfect way to end the show. Yeah, I cannot drop a better way.
A good offensive line for Kyler Murray is like having double XP every weekend.
You know what? I don't think I need to say anything else. I really don't. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the All Cardinals Draft Talk podcast. For Andrew Harbaugh, my name is Donnie, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. Obviously, we'll try to be doing this weekly as we lead in to the draft process and free agency. Obviously, I'll be out combine, so a lot more content coming your way from Broderick Jones, from Jalen Carter, from Will Anderson, and anybody else who can ruin your dreams. So it'll be a grand old time on this podcast with me and Andrew. But like I said, thank you so much. And then don't forget, contest. Win a free Super Bowl commemorative ball. All you got to do is go to the last video we posted, drop a comment on your predictions. It literally could not be easier. And the best part, it's free. I'm paying for it. It's free. Who doesn't like free stuff?
I can speak from experience. Donnie's money is the best money. So
thank you. It's often referred to as monopoly money. I try to tell the people at McDonald's that, but they don't really believe me. But you know what? That's another story for another day. Like I said, everybody, I hope you enjoy Super Bowl 57. We've been enjoying covering it here at allcardinals.com or si.com/NFL/Cardinals. We will see you guys next week.